Hi, I'm Noah, and fun fact, I also was up for Babygirl, but I'm lactose intolerant. So
What a sin.
I know, and I'm joined here with Derek, of course.
Who is also lactose intolerant.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
Lactate household.
that's right. Lactate, almond milk, oat milk creamer. We got it all.
We're talking Babygirl today.
Oh, yeah.
All right, first official episode of a bite of this year of a first movie, right?
Yeah, like a first official review, I would say.
And it's Babygirl time, Nicole Kidman's newest movie. Ooh.
Baby girl. Feeling sexy, baby girl.
This had come on my radar, I would say towards the end of the year last year. And then I forgot about it. And then it was like award season's coming up. And there's like all this buzz about this movie. And we're like, why don't we do this? This seems a little out there for us. But
I like this for us.
I love this journey.
Yeah. It's a different kind of magic than we're used to talking about.
All right. Before we get into everything, follow, subscribe, review, all of those wonderful, amazing, beautiful things. We are still on the social media platforms. As long as you guys are there, we will be there. We'll stick it out with you guys. So yeah, I mean, spoilers ahead for Babygirl. You haven't seen it.
If you don't want to know about every single sexy good time that happens in Babygirl, I would stop listening right now. Because we're going to get sick.
Ew. I promise we're mature. We will be mature for this review.
I was very mature watching the movie.
Yeah.
I felt very in control of myself and very into the art. Now I've lost it.
Good job.
Let us officially take a bite of Babygirl, written and directed by Halina Reijn. Powerful tech CEO Romy gives into her deepest desires and surrenders her power to a young intern, Samuel, who captures her attention and takes control. Milk.
Ew. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what did you think of Babygirl?
Let me tell you a story about Babygirl.
Okay.
I went into it going, oh God, like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I watched it and I was like, oh, okay. So I will say I really liked it.
I am very surprised by that. You have been surprising me a lot more lately.
Full of surprises.
I love this journey for you. I feel like your movie horizons have been opened a little bit, and I love it.
I'm just exploring. I'm an movie explorer. These new horizons, I just love them.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I'm glad that you did like it because this movie is interesting. I don't know how to feel about it. I like it. But also, it's one of those movies where I have thought about it quite a bit, but I don't know what I'm thinking. Does that... there's no conclusion for this movie. It's not a typical movie of when a woman is in the situation, it's shameful, or, she doesn't get the good side of the story at the end. And none of that really happens in this. So trying to figure out what they're trying to say with this movie and also just not really saying with it is an interesting experience.
I think that this movie follows many similar beats that a movie about someone committing adultery follows. But I think that what it does is that it delves into a side of sexuality that I don't believe is depicted on screen in sort of this tender, fragile way, especially with the type of relationship that they have. So I think that's what makes it different. That's what makes it feel a little more kind of highbrow in a sense, right? Because some people are describing this as like a psychological erotic thriller, kind of in the vein of Basic Instinct. But the writer-director calls it a comedy of manners and asks the question, can you love even the most shameful parts of yourself?
That's really fun. Okay, so I like that. I like that a lot because I honestly don't agree that it's a thriller. There's moments where it's like, even though the morality of almost every single character in this movie is like, it's not about what's right and wrong, right? It's about, I would say, about shame for most of these characters. But I like that. I like that they're explaining that it's like, it's more about the exploration of that. And that's true because it's not really Because by the end of it, it's like there's not really a happy ending. It's just a character developed in a certain way. And that's it. There's really no conclusion, which I feel like is just weird for me.
Yeah.
It's ambiguous in a way where it's like, oh, but wait. Oh, that's it. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that it really fit it, right? I mean, I don't think that we were expecting them to run off into the distance in a happily ever after, storyline. I think that it very much centers on Romy, Nicole Kidman's character here, and really seeing her, literally and figuratively stripped down.
Without her, I don't think this movie would have worked. Like, she carried the hell out of this movie. And I think to her supporting cast's credit, they let her do that. Because I felt like Samuel, who is Dickinson's character, if he did too much, it would have taken away from that. And I liked how it let her do everything she needed to do, and he supported her in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Where I feel like a lot of times in these movies, they tend to do the male gaze. They tend to, I don't know, the man is fine. The women is going to be X, Y, and Z in this position. But it was flipped in a way that I appreciated.
Mm-hmm.
And I also feel like this movie is kind of like a kink coming out story, because her whole thing, right, is that in her relationship, I think she's with him for almost 20 years.
Yeah, like 19 years.
Antonio Banderas, which I was like, is that Antonio Banderas? Okay. Looks great for his age. Which if we're going to do like a male gazy thing, if we put these two male characters, I'm like, girl, Antonio Banderas.
Come on with that salt and pepper beard, though. Yes.
Yeah. So you find out that she hasn't had an orgasm this entire time, which it's like, girl, 19 years, like you need to say something. Like that was the most unbelievable part of this movie. It's like, you're a CEO, you're really successful, you're in a marriage for almost 20 years, and it's like, you have an orgasm? Like, you should tell somebody.
Well, yeah. Well, so in watching this movie, I kept trying to figure out, like, what is it about, right? In the beginning, what it felt to me it was about was communication and how hard it is to tell even your life partner what it is you truly want.
I guess that is it. I guess that is a normal thing, right? Like it's the person that you're supposed to be the most vulnerable with and are in these vulnerable moments with is hard to say, I want more or less of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
That is really interesting. I didn't think about it that way.
Yeah.
So never mind. I take that back. I'm sorry.
Well, well, it's funny, right? I think especially in media, I'm not saying that it necessarily fully, truly depicts real life relationships, but those lines are always like, well, why didn't you say something? Why didn't you tell me? Right. And it just doesn't, it does feel hard sometimes to communicate with that person. And it's interesting. You think that would be the person that you would feel most free with, but sometimes you might feel the most judged by them.
Well, right. And
right?
You also like can't escape them.
Right. Totally.
You're like, I'm going to live with this person.
Yeah.
And they're going to judge me, even though they might, but it's all about working. Right. So how did you feel about the depiction of sex in this movie? Because it is erotic. I wouldn't say it's extremely erotic. Like there is definitely sexual situations, but in a different way than what I guess you would expect.
Yeah, well, I think that literally the opening scene of this movie is her faking an orgasm and then immediately running to their office and masturbating to pornography because she can't have an orgasm with her husband, right?
I wonder what words of these we can actually say on YouTube. I'm just realizing that.
Well, I'm using big people words, I think, so far.
Sorry, I didn't mean to like cut in.
Are we going to get demonetized because of Babygirl?
Let's see. Anyway, continue. I'm sorry.
I don't think we can even get demonetized or whatever. So I think that it very much is centered on sex, right? But a lot of the strongest scenes for me is when because the relationship she ends up having with Samuel is sort of a dom sub relationship, right? And control. Yeah. So I'm not a sexpert, so I might be using the wrong terms. I do apologize. But she's trying to give up that control. That's what she's always wanted. And some of those scenes that I found most powerful was she's finally getting this thing that she's always truly desired, but it's so hard for her to do that. There's one scene in particular where he tells her, take off your panties. And she's like, no, I don't want to. And this is like they're deep into the relationship already. She's still so embarrassed and feels so uncomfortable. And I think that Nicole Kidman did such an amazing job of balancing that vulnerability and feeling so uncomfortable, but feeling so sexual in those positions that it was kind of mind-blowing for me.
I really liked, I liked the sex scenes because they did feel different than a typical sex scene. I know there's this discourse that is online as well with the younger generation of like, there's too much sex. And then like our generation is like, there's not enough sex and things. And I feel like, especially this last year, there's a lot of movies exploring sex in different types of ways. And Babygirl coming onto the scene. So in the beginning, it stays on her. And then when she goes into the other room to finish herself, it still stays on her. In the cheap hotel room with Samuel and herself, I think is their first sexual encounter, it stays on her the entire time through their entire thing that they're doing. And it was such an interesting decision to do that because you can see her going from shame to giving over to then fully realizing this is what I needed that entire time. And then back to shame a little bit. And that's why she starts crying at the end of it, because she's like, this is what I've been missing. This is what I need. And so doing that and understanding that creates this whole fucked up thing of, oh, I still want to have this thing, but I have this whole business. I have this family. I have this life. Those two can't mix. And so that's when it gets interesting because the trailer makes it seem like a thriller, but it's not like that. They have this really interesting conversation of consent. And it's after like something happens with their relationship and then they come back together. And that conversation with consent, I don't think I've ever really seen on screen before, at least to that depth, right? Of just, here's the lines of no lines. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think as an audience member watching it, you're trying to figure out his motive, right?
Always like keeping him like, what is he going to do?
Yeah. What is he doing? Why is he getting so involved with her? But when that conversation of consent comes up, you do feel like, oh, wait a minute, there are real feelings here, right? Because he does truly respect her. And that's the thing. I think for a lot of people, when you hear of a sort of whatever, for lack of a better term, I'm calling it like a dominant subordinate
just
thing.
Not a typical.
Right. We think that, well, that means that one person is abusing the other person or they're less than them. But in this conversation, they are equals. It's just that in this way that they have sex, that's not necessarily how it plays out with the way he talks to her and how he gives her commands of things to do, but he really does care about her.
Yeah, it's interesting because he ends up getting into a relationship with Wilde's character. What's her name? Sophie, I believe?
Esme. Sophie Wilde is the actor's name.
Right. Sophie Wilde, Esme, which also I didn't know that it was the same actor from Talk to Me.
Yeah.
Completely I just didn't even put that together. Fantastic. But when he gets into the relationship with her, they have a conversation about that. And he's like, well, no, I like her for a different reason than I like you. So it's a really, I guess not, like, I just typically don't hear these types of conversations in movies where it's like, you see the thing happening, the affair and stuff like that, but you don't really get to the why of it. And also how it's like a necessity for that person, something that's been missing from them and they need to explore it in that way. So I'm not saying they're right because they're definitely not right. Even just like baseline, you're a CEO, he's an intern. Like, let's not do that.
And you're also cheating on your husband. And, and so it's like, I think with conversations of things like polyamory and things like that, when people are in a relationship and they're polyamorous, they're having a conversation about it.
They all consented to do
that.
Right.
Exactly. Whereas that's the missing piece in this, you know.
Who knows? Maybe you could have talked to Antonio Banderas and been like, you want to like open this up?
Yeah, Noah and I were hoping for a threesome. There was one moment where you think maybe, but then it doesn't happen.
When they all confront each other in that second home, which is like a mansion, disgusting wealth. But when they confront each other and like Antonio's character and Dickinson's character like put their heads together, I'm like, it is happening. I was about to flip out and be like, this just rose to the ranks of one of my favorite movies. I'm like, yes.
Number one Christmas movie ever.
Oh my God. Horny holidays.
Come on. That's the subgenre we've been missing.
Yeah. We got horror holidays. We need horny holidays.
Exactly.
Give me more of that. But I was so hoping that they were going to kiss or something of like, oh, you want to do it? I want to get on this too. Come on.
I kept thinking like, oh, well, he's like a Broadway director. He could be into it. You don't know. He could be bi or something like that. But it didn't happen.
It didn't.
But I think that my main point is that she's trying to almost justify it in a way, right? She even looks to her teenage daughter who has a girlfriend, Mary, but then when they're at this upstate home, ends up kind of hooking up with the girl next door, right?
Ophelia.
And yeah, Ophelia. Interesting. They're in the water. Ophelia in the water.
Wow.
Hello.
Layers.
Yeah. And so Nicole Kidman, you know, very like calmly is like, so what's going on? I thought you were with Mary. She's like, I am with Mary. She's like, I was just having some fun with Ophelia. So Nicole Kidman, you know, hears Samuel say that's, you know, I like Esme for a different reason. And then her daughter is saying, well, I do this with Mary and this with Ophelia. And so she's almost like she's having her mind opened to these different types of relationships that can exist. And again, maybe if she would have had a conversation with her husband, she wouldn't be, you know, unfaithful. But, also that reminded me of that Diane Lane movie. Wasn't it called Unfaithful?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so it's very much a similar thing.
Well, also like Eyes Wide Shut. Like just if you haven't seen the movie, see it's different. You can tell the different times of when it was made, but it's interesting contrast between Nicole Kidman then and doing a particular movie that is very like erotic in nature, and then this one. But yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I wanted to also talk, since we brought her up, about Esme, because as I was thinking about this, so there's the first time that he's like, it feels like Samuel's intruding on her family is he comes upstate with her laptop.
Ew.
And I believe he says something like, well, Esme told me to bring it to you. We find out at the end of the movie that Esme has known about her and Samuel. So I almost wonder if in that moment, Esme was trying to trip her up by sending him up there without telling her.
I don't know. Like, I want to believe. So that's a really interesting dynamic there. If we want to talk about, you know, her character, I think she is the only one you can really root for in this entire movie, because it's like, yes, talk to her about her promotion. Do initiatives to get more women to come into the company. Love everything she's doing. And then at the end, she didn't necessarily blackmail her. She didn't be like, it wasn't woman against woman. It was very much like, look, you're doing whatever you want to do, but can you, for the love of God, pay attention to your company?
Yeah.
Or let me do some things, which I was like, hell yeah.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I did like about this movie, is that it didn't necessarily shame her for what she was doing. Nobody was really shamed in that way, but also it's like, you guys are stupid. Like, stop doing what you're doing. But I did like that character doing that, but I don't think in that moment she did. I think it was at the party where she finally clicked.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And then when she almost finds out, Nicole Kidman throws away
a whole cake,
3-layer chocolate cake. That was the biggest offense to me in this movie. I couldn't believe it. I clutched my pearls.
Babygirl doesn't want no cake.
Babygirl, you've been on my mind. Fulfill my chocolate cake fantasy.
Speaking of songs, I will say the costuming was so good. I loved the neutrals and creams and stuff that they had Nicole Kidman's character wear. And then in specific scenes, she wore like colors.
That blue dress.
So good. The asymmetrical dress, really cool. The music in this movie, I loved. The original score, there was just this like kind of haunting, drumming, heartbeaty kind of just intense noise they kept using, which really made me feel like it was a thriller, but more of like I'm being thrilled by what's happening.
Oh yeah, titillating.
Yeah, titillating soundtrack. And then also just the soundtrack. Using George Michael's father figure, I love, that was my favorite scene in the entire movie, from the raid all the way up into that room. Oh, it was so good. The rave was long, but the more it went on, the more I was like, oh yeah.
Maybe I want to go to a rave.
Yeah, yeah.
Whoa.
But in the inverse, I do think it's worth noting for this movie that sex is not just serious. It's also funny and silly. And there's a lot of moments in this movie where it shows that, where it's like, yeah, it's kind of messy. Like when he's feeding her that candy, it was awkward. It wasn't super sexy, but like, oh, I'm enjoying what I'm doing. It's not flawless. Like I can't get it in the first try, but I liked how they showed that. It wasn't like super manicured in a way. It's like sex is silly.
Yeah. And you will never look at the strawberry candy that your grandmother gives you the same way ever again.
Mm.
Nor will you maybe not look at a small dish of milk or a full glass of milk as well.
How did you feel about how he came on to her?
So that was a question I had for you. So one little problem, I would say, a nitpicky thing I had is, I don't know if it's necessarily a pacing issue, but I felt like their relationship came out of literally nowhere.
I think it was opportunity. I think they both saw an opportunity and acted on it. Like there is a moment where I think the first thing he does is in that conversation that they have with the meeting.
The ping pong? Ping pong balls?
I don't
remember. She says part of the test was that she had to see how many ping pong balls could fit in a room.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that meeting. And like she's going to leave, and then he closes the door, and he's like, and he's like, they kiss. So it did come on a little strong, but I felt like he clocked her immediately because he knew. I think it's in that conversation where he's like, you want to relinquish control, essentially. It's like he clocked her, like that.
But that's my thing. How?
I think they just needed to do it. They just needed to jump in.
Right. So that's I think my one sticking point was that, glances across the office and one cup of coffee does not equal, hi, woman, that is now my new boss.
Okay. But
you relinquish control.
But making her drink a glass of milk and saying good girl and then leaving the room. Oh, that will do it.
Thank you.
Good girl.
Why milk?
Because she's a baby. Why do you think it's called Babygirl? She's a sexy baby.
I'm a very sexy baby.
If you know what that's from, comment below.
Yeah.
Because we're best friends.
Whose lap am I going to sit on?
Are we going to give the gentleman what he asked for?
So yeah, she's a very sexy baby.
She is.
You're right. You're right.
So I guess let's do final thoughts, right? Give me your final thoughts.
My final thoughts are kind of give into the unexpected nature of this. Don't judge it. I think that you could go into it judging the things that are happening because, America was formed by Puritans who were prudes. So...
And I think they're coming back.
Yo, are they? They're already here.
Yeah.
I think just go into it and experience it because I think it is very sexy. And I think that it does a good job of not somehow over-sexualizing an erotic movie.
I really appreciated that because I feel like this is more of a character study on this particular moment in this woman's life. And I think watch it if you can't watch it with somebody that can not snicker at when somebody says nuts or balls. I would
now we're that can't go on YouTube for sure.
Well, but so like just go into it being like, okay, what is this about? Let me like seriously watch it because I have heard people like have terrible theater experiences with it of like people just laughing.
Right.
And it's like, well, that's immature.
It's like when you see a horror movie, you want to be scared And it's annoying when people laugh.
Right.
And make fun of it. It's like, go into this not doing that because you'll ruin the experience.
Right. And so, yeah. So I think it's an interesting character study on sex and how this particular woman deals with that. The only thing I will say that I didn't really care for is that not every different sexual proclivity needs to have a root in childhood trauma. Because there was a moment where she talks about how she was like in a cult and all of that stuff, which then could go into wanting to have somebody control you, all this thing, right? I don't think it's a healthy conversation to always tack that on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because there is, that gets misconstrued a lot. So I don't think we needed it, because also that was said in such a passing manner that we didn't need it.
Yeah. I mean, in that same conversation, she goes, I used to think it was that, but I think there's just something wrong with me.
Right.
But I think by the end of the movie, we see her last sexual experience on screen being back with her husband and her experiencing kind of what she wants from that. There isn't a shame there. And hopefully she no longer believes that there's something wrong with her for wanting this type of sex.
Right. And even though it is in the same exact way that she had a sexual encounter with Samuel.
And she is fantasizing about Samuel while it's happening.
Yeah, which I'm not shaming her for. Do what you got to do, I guess. But like, they still need to have a conversation.
They're just trying to make it work.
Yeah.
They're trying to make it work.
So final thoughts, Nicole Kidman, fantastic. I think this movie deserves to be in the awards conversation at some level because she did a freaking amazing job.
And what's so funny is that I've been like, I can't believe she's doing all these silly Netflix movies, but then she also did this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, okay, it's Nicole Kidman. She does what she wants.
And Antonio Banderas, still really hot.
Still really hot.
Still really hot. So go watch Babygirl. If you've seen it, let us know what you thought. What did you think about Babygirl? And do you like milk? I can't drink a glass of milk. I mean, I know I'm lactose intolerant, but like I never...
I will only have like a small mug of milk with some cookies. Not even that.
No.
Not even that.
Mm-mm. All right. Well, on that milky note, goodbye.
Oh, bye.